To mark 50 years of the Community Council of Devon providing support for the rural population of the county, the Community Council, supported by the Heritage Lottery Fund, commissioned a project to reflect on the legacy of community action. This film is complementary to the projects undertaken by the participating groups and illustrates a number of the current challenges to rural living. We hear the stories of community projects and demonstrate just some of the ways in which the Community Council stimulates strong and vibrant communities.
Rural communities have always been very self-sufficient and have an honourable tradition of really looking after themselves and looking after their local residents. But even in Devon, rural communities are changing.
Now, we've been having a lunch today to celebrate 50 years of Community Council of Devon working with communities, and around the table with me today, my guests are people who've actually been doing community-led planning and working with communities.
But certainly I see this as something which is hugely important, hugely empowering.
If we continue to do good community-led planning, the value of a parish plan will feed in to the new generation of neighbourhood plans as then.
What we have to do, and Cliff's absolutely right on this, is we have to listen. The priority is to listen to our communities, see what our communities want, and then build it into as strategic ways.
And also collectively, if all the villages' parish plans were all coming out with wanting, say, a particular piece of infrastructure, that is power.
Hello, my name's Elaine Cook and I'm the Chief Executive of the Community Council of Devon. I came to Devon in July of this year as the new Chief Executive, and I was absolutely delighted to be joining the team at the Community Council. 2011 has been a pretty challenging year, I think, for everyone. For me, coming into Devon as a new resident and starting a new job and taking on a new team. But I think also for CCD generally, a time when we're seeing massive changes in the way the world is working, big cuts coming in the public sector, and CCD certainly hasn't been immune from any of that. We have an ageing population. Many of our young people can no longer stay in our rural communities because of the price of housing.
I'm Sue Southwell. I'm one of a team of 3 rural housing enablers employed by the Community Council of Devon. We work with district councils, housing associations and parish councils to help deliver affordable housing in rural communities. And over the last 3 years, we've helped deliver about 150 rural homes over Devon. The 3 main problems are the low wages that are experienced by many people living in rural Devon, the high house prices driven up by affluent people moving to Devon for a rural lifestyle, and also the lack of affordable housing in rural communities where a lot of housing has been bought through the right to buy policy, and so left a dearth of houses at low rents. I'm here today at St Giles in the Wood, where the rural housing enablers are really pleased to have helped deliver 8 affordable housing for local people for this community. The whole project started with a parish plan that was carried out by the parish council and the community of St Giles in the Wood, and identified a need for affordable housing for local people here. We then carried out a housing needs survey which identified 11 actual people in housing need living in the village. On the back of this, we looked for sites and did a site survey with members of the parish council and people from Torridge District Council. And very quickly we found that there was one site that looked like it was the most suitable here at the old nursery. Having found the site, we spoke to the landowner, who fortunately was very keen to help to provide something here for local people. And from then on we involved the Devon and Cornwall Housing Association, who agreed to take on the construction and the management of these properties. And here they are, and designed in keeping with the local vernacular, and cottages down the road show exactly the same features of the pointy arch and the stone around the windows. So a very successful development which we're all really proud to have been involved in. I'm sitting here with Lorna Herneman, who's chair of St Giles in the Wood Parish Council.
It had been a long time dream for us to have some affordable housing in St Giles in the Wood, and nobody thought it would ever happen. But anyway, eventually we were in touch with the Community Council of Devon, and Annie Petherick came along. We had a public meeting. So we had the parish plan, and then affordable housing was high on the list. I mean, some of the parish councillors, they wanted to choose who would go in the houses. But I felt personally that wasn't the right thing to do. There was a young couple who are actually in the houses here, and he said, they tell me that they won't get anybody local in them at all. They'll be from London and Manchester, and even worse, Bideford.
Hello, my name's Verity Hookway. Welcome to my home, which is in Nursery Close, St Giles in the Wood. We've lived here for about 8 months now. I've lived in the parish of St Giles for about 20 years, and previous to moving into this home was living in private rented accommodation, which was fine but didn't give me the long-term security I needed for myself and the children. Obviously this home has given us that security, which is something that nobody can take away from you. When we saw the parish advertise that there was a possibility of affordable housing, I went to a couple of the meetings up at the village hall and got very enthusiastic about it, and hoped that one day one of these houses might be mine. We followed the progress of the parish applications and also the building. We used to drive past every day and say, oh, we might be lucky enough to have one of those houses, and we were. One of the many benefits of this home of ours is the security that we now have. I've got 3 children. They know that this is now their home, which is obviously important while they're younger and for me, but also as they grow older, that this is their home and that they can come back to this house. They love living in St Giles. We're part of the community. We know all the neighbours. We get involved in the community life, and living here has enabled us to do that without having to move to the closest town, which would be sort of 4 miles away. We are very happy here. The house is lovely. It's been designed really, really well. We really enjoy the open plan living. We have a downstairs toilet, which is a godsend when you've got children. It's very, very spacious, and the bedrooms upstairs were a lot more spacious than what I thought they were going to be. Whilst there may not be all the facilities that a town would offer, I think being part of a community and being in the community of St Giles easily outweighs the benefits that being in a town would have. We know everybody in the village. The children can call for their friends, they can go out and play safely. All the parents or all the families within the village look after, keep an eye out on other people's children. And it's just really, really nice, and it's one of those things that you don't realise you haven't got it, or you can't quite put your finger on it until it's not there, and then you realise it's being part of a community that really matters and is really important.
One of the particular challenges facing rural communities is the gradual loss of rural shops and rural pubs. This is an area where the Community Council has a particular expertise. We call it social enterprise, but we can work with local communities to help them find ways to maintain these services in their villages, perhaps through community ownership.
The village shop, open all hours, stocking almost all our needs, but with home deliveries and the large supermarkets, is our grocery store in rural communities a thing of the past. We lose a place where people can meet and socialise, even if it's just to pick up a pint of milk. Hello, I'm Charlotte and I work for the Community Council of Devon in the social enterprise team.
We lost our only shop and post office in December 2001, and we're a very isolated rural village, and we needed a post office and we needed shopping facilities. So necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. As in a lot of villages in Devon, there is a very high proportion of elderly people, quite a lot without their own transport, and they don't use banks very much. They wanted to get their pension in cash from the post office. And then we realised that we simply must have a permanent shop and post office, and we realised also that the coffee shop or the cafe had become a very important part of life, of the community life here in Exbourne. So we set in motion plans to build our new shop. People think we're rather batty. We are actually going underground, so it's called the Burrow, and it will be an eco-friendly, specifically designed to fit in with our local environment. So we had a lot of advice from the Community Council of Devon, Versa and the Plunkett Foundation, and all those organisations are heavily involved in promoting community shops. We try and promote local producers and try and keep the money within the community. And obviously in the new shop we'll have a much wider scope for this. About 3 years ago we started opening on a Wednesday afternoon, and we came across another section of society that we hadn't factored in, which we should have done, is the young farmer's wife living fairly isolated on their farms, who come in to pick the children up from the primary school, wait for the children from Oakhampton College, and they come in here for half an hour to have a cup of coffee. And one of the mothers said to me, "This is the only time that I can sit down and have a talk with my friends." This is a community facility, so yes, the shop side of it we hope will be exciting, because we'll have a lot of local produce, a lot of unusual items, but the community side, the cafe side, will be an internet cafe. We'll have a prescription drop-off, we'll have book exchange, dry cleaning, pick-up point. Anything you can get in a town, we hope we will be able to provide in the borough, which is a shop, a post office, a cafe, and a general community facility. Things that are small groups with small numbers of people who don't want to hire the village hall. I mean, we are not going to take away from the village hall. The village hall will still be used even more now when we're out of the way for things like skittles and jumble sales and dances.
Today we've learnt how a group have come together to solve a problem. We're really grateful for Sally and the team of volunteers who have taken the time to tell us about this exciting community enterprise. While burying your community shop may be a bit unusual, the community enterprise model is proving successful as a model across the country, and the Community Council of Devon is here to help you. But it's not only our village stores that are fast disappearing, our pubs are also disappearing at an alarming rate. So could a bit of self-help help to save your pint? Cheers.
The village hall is very much at the centre of rural life, and the Community Council of Devon has for the last 50 years provided a specialist service supporting the management committees of village halls. Looking forward, we can see that the village hall is going to become increasingly an important centre of activity within any village, a place which will be a real community hub where a whole range of services can be delivered.
There was a certain amount of work needed doing to the hall, and we approached CCD, I believe, in about 2001.
Our vision is of rural communities with local people who have the skills, the knowledge and confidence to be able to participate fully in their communities, of communities that have the skills and the aptitude to be able to respond to the needs of their own local residents.
Since then, a whole programme of works on the hall that over the years we've jointly financed with our efforts and grants from West Devon and CCD.
I think they were the ones, CCD were the ones when we initially started all the work, that there was quite a lot of structural damage to the hall that needed work, and it was obviously going to be quite an expensive operation in total. And for a small village like Broadwood Kelly, with just 100 houses, it was going to be quite an undertaking. And I think it was the advice from CCD that with such a big project, the best way of tackling it would be to break it down into different phases, which we took on board, and that was the work that was done over the following 5 years or so, was it? Something like that. And we had a new extension at the back, a new meeting room which was much warmer and better for people with hearing difficulties because it had an acoustic ceiling.
A new kitchen and disabled WC, and but it's still going on.
My name's David Kinross and I work for the Community Council of Devon, leading on village halls and community buildings work. Devon's got over 500 village halls, and most of them act as the key centres to their communities, alongside the other favourites of the church and the pub and the village shop. I think more and more the hall is becoming the hub of the community.
When we first knew about CCD, they were about the only organisation that was funding capital projects, so there really wasn't anywhere else to go, and we knew nothing about the other aspects that CCD would provide. And
we run a range of services, the first being funding. Most halls are falling down or in a state of disrepair, having been around for a couple of 100 years, and need resources to maintain their infrastructure. So on that front we run a loan scheme, and a county grant scheme, a community grant scheme to help support halls and develop them further.
The project all started back in the early 1990s when I used to regularly run square dances in the little village hall that we had, and it just got rather tiresome that when I came to the refreshments I'd got water dripping through the roof and was shuffling cups around so it didn't land in the actual cups of coffee. So my friend and I from the village, Joyce Murden, decided that we would go to the next village hall AGM and suggest to them that maybe it was time to replace our old hall. Well, it wasn't particularly well received, but by the end of the evening we left there as chairman and secretary of the committee, and we had someone down from the community council, Kathleen Perkins I believe at the time, and they gave us lots of advice, and said that our first move was to have an open meeting for the village. About 90% of them that were there were really happy with the situation. The other 10% thought that we were going to leave the village with an awful millstone round its neck. We thought, well, with the possibility of getting planning permission on the old hall site, inconvenient though it was, but we talked to the planning office and they said, well, if this was to raise funds for a new village hall, they would support a planning application on it. We got an architect in the village who my husband had happened to do some work for, helping with his house without charging him, so when we needed an architect it seemed logical that we asked him, and he came along and probably saved us about £8,000 and drew up some plans for us. The next thing was to secure the site and decide how big an area we wanted, and we thought we needed to have parking for 50 cars because most of the halls we went to have got insufficient car parking, and we thought to draw people in from outside we needed to provide good car parking. So the friend that owned this site, I tried to tie him down for some time for a price. He offered to sell us the whole field for 25,000, but we couldn't afford that sort of money. We just wanted a bit of the field. So eventually we shook hands on 5,000 for half an acre. Our biggest setback, of course, was because on the limited money that we were going to have, we felt that we had to build it ourselves, literally block by block and slate by slate. And we had every trade that we needed apart from the electrician, and we just had to grit our teeth and pay him. You'd never believe how many people that we begged and borrowed and cajoled into giving us good prices. I spent, although I was down here all daytime, we then went home as a family and worked out what materials we needed. When we were applying for grants, we had to come up with details as to how we thought we were going to warrant having this new hall and the various people that were going to use it. So we got all sorts of letters of support from British conservation volunteers and the young farmers, and numerous bodies all wrote in support and said how they would use the hall when it was finished. And 12 months later we had to fill in the next set of forms and say who was using it and what sort of income we were getting, and it was absolutely uncanny that the income that we'd had in the 12 months matched almost to the penny, or certainly to within £50 of what we'd estimated, but by a completely different set of people. We'd had weddings, we'd had all sorts of things in, but the things that we expected weren't the people that were using it. The committee that we originally formed and that transferred from the old hall, and new members that came when we had this new hall, have stayed really constant over the years. Unfortunately, the most constant one is myself as chairman, which I've been for 20 years this year. I'm still trying to relinquish it, but it's not working yet. Most villages are finding that it's getting more and more difficult to get volunteers to help. But I mean, the hall itself is not a financial burden to anybody. In fact, I'm almost ashamed to say that we no longer do any fundraising at all. The bookings that we have for letting it, for regular things like 2 nights of badminton a week, and meditating groups, dancers, bowls, lunch clubs, craft fairs, everything you can think of come here. Chicken shows, budgerigard shows, and so many of them are brought in from outside because of our car park. We knew that we needed 50 car spaces. It wasn't very long before I went back to the original owner of the ground and said, can we buy another strip, because we actually need 100 car parking spaces. And that, for us and for the rest of the village, has been absolutely invaluable. Any fundraising needed for the church, harvest supper, plant stall, those sort of things are all held here, of course. And although our constitution says that everybody has to pay, we do, of course, do concessionary rates to other village charities, because it's pointless charging them top whack. A number of people in Rattery would never be able to support a hall of this size financially, so we are really dependent on outside users, which we do get a lot of, and we try to be as accommodating as possible to encourage them to come. Of course, we've gone for the photovoltaic panels on the roof, because our biggest cost by a long way was the electricity, because the hall is all powered by electricity. And now the PV panels are now bringing in over 6,000 a year, and plus our normal profit of about 10,000 a year. There's no need for us to do any fundraising directly for the hall, which is quite a relief.
I'm Paul Baker, and I'm Managing Director of Devon Association for Renewable Energy. Been associated with the Community Council of Devon over many years now, and actually we formed the company back in the year 2000 as a result of community activities within our own parish, and we're still actually located there. So the community involvement with renewable energy is what drove us in the first place to develop and actually establish the company. So that there is a lot of good feeling between organisations like ourselves and the Community Council, and we do whatever we can to help support them. Over the years there's been a number of sort of actually funded programmes that have enabled us to work together on things like giving free advice to communities and in relation to community buildings. sadly, much of that has disappeared these days, and as a result of that, actually, the community council themselves have taken a much more proactive role, and we find that it's them themselves that are leading activities within in the renewable sector towards communities, rather than just funded programs to deliver renewable energy. It's coming from the community side themselves these days, which is interesting and helps to form new partnerships as we've got going here. So, and this whole program around raising awareness and providing information to enable community organisations to take forward initiatives around energy efficiency, saving and renewables is one which we thoroughly support, because it just sits entirely within our overall ethos. And because of that, we're only too happy to get involved with any kind of events like this which the Community Council organise.
As well as that, there's also the need to be run legally and effectively and efficiently. And a lot of halls pass on the baton from one committee to the next without often referring to the rules or the regulations. And to that end, we run a hallmark scheme, which is a quality assurance system.
Hallmark has been another big thing, hasn't it? It occupied us visiting lots of other halls. That was initiated in 2007, April 2007, our first training session, I think. And I don't know, we probably visited 6 or 8 or more village halls, looking at what they do, comparing their hall with our own hall, of course, as you do in many ways, and thinking what lovely halls some of these people have.
How fortunate they are to have badminton courts and audiences and concerts and things like that, which isn't available here, but there we are. But I think we got out of Hallmark almost as much as hopefully they got out for having us as peer visitors. I think the networking is quite good on Hallmark. I thoroughly approve of that.
And also, being such a large county, it takes over an hour to get north of the moor from our Exeter base. We often try and do a lot of our work through phone and email and web communications. But with over 500 halls, we do find ourselves stretched. And the way of addressing that is working in partnership with other organisations with shared objectives.
The latest thing is that we've embarked on doing a parish plan. We had a great toolkit, CTD, so that there was no problem about what the procedures were and what we needed to do and with whom, which was great. There's even a sample constitution in there as well, which was very helpful. And we had public meetings here in the hall and brought everybody together. It's a great community thing. And at the moment, we are finalising the draft, and hopefully a nice shiny document will be available within a not too distant future.
A parish plan has to be a good way of getting that information through to you, because in our case we did a questionnaire, quite an intensive questionnaire, which got the views of everybody in the community. So it sort of gets it from the people in the village to us, and then to you. So
I think it's a two-way thing as well. Torridge has to respond to you. And I think that's hugely important. I think we've got, and you've seen certainly Bradworthy and Bridgerall as well. You've seen officers from Torridge coming out into your communities and actually engaging along with the Community Council of Devon, in terms of pushing this forward, because it shows how much we actually value the parish plans at the moment. That are in place and the ones that we need to update. And in fact, we do have 1 or 2 still outstanding. That we are chasing up and trying to ensure that everyone has an equality of opportunity, if you like, in this respect. Issue here as well is that your council has to be seen to be working with its parishes. Very often councils, district councils, for example, are criticised, because they look at legislation, they perhaps deal with things in one way, which was detached, from its communities. And what we need to do is we need to ensure that our officers are actively engaged with our parishes, so that people are working together and moving forward on both sides.
Well, I mean, you're obviously, it's the second time round, isn't it? I mean, you've obviously thought it's so, such a useful thing to do that you're going to do this refreshing process. And you're getting people on board with that?
That's right. It is important that you don't stand still. To do a plan and then not think about how we progress it would just be living in the past, and obviously everything is changing. So it's important that we look at where we were, where we want to be, how it's changed. And we have gone about it in a slightly different way this time, and we set up steering groups, so to speak, on each of the areas. So we involved people from the village on housing and transport and industry, etc. Yes, and the community council have been very good at coming up with new ideas for ways forward. It's been very helpful.
Yes, we try to include them in whatever meetings that we can put together for you.
I found the community council very, very helpful with ours. I was stalled for quite a long time, and then Martin came along to a meeting to sort of revive the process, really, and after that it did get going. I do think nowadays maybe a written parish plan, which we did, maybe sort of getting slightly out of date, and it could be kept up to date on maybe online or on the internet, and a sort of thing, I don't know, group maybe Facebook and things like that to get people's views.
Yes. I go around and I see obviously quite a number of parishes. I've got 28 parishes in my county ward, and it's a big number.
Yes.
The biggest in Devon, and you look around and you see the engagement now that's taking place.
Because I know myself, I've been to some meetings where there's a point's been raised that never ever makes it to the actual parish plan, because somebody raises it as an issue and then somebody else who was at the meeting actually solves the problem there and then. And I think the other really nice thing from my point of view, because I also advise and help parish councils, is that it's an opportunity for the parish councillors to be really well known in their community and to actually get to know people and see people that they wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to meet, because everyone leads busy lives, don't they?
The interesting thing with ours, with the parish council, because I am a parish councillor as well, we found that a lot of people didn't like it because they thought the parish council was a closed society and nobody was allowed to know anything that was going on. So since then we've had a website and tried to tell people, keep people informed what is going on all the time, and that came out of the parish plan. It wasn't an actual target for the plan, but it was just one of those little asides that happened, really.
I think it's a really interesting progress from a political point of view, because it's the kind of questions that won't get asked during an election, particularly, or won't get addressed during the normal political process. And it's a way to find out some really interesting issues that would otherwise just fall by the wayside. And people like being asked.
Yes,
when a questionnaire lands on their doorstep, they actually enjoy thinking about their community, thinking what they like, thinking what they don't like. They actually like feeling appreciated. It's the fact that someone's taken the time to come to you and ask your opinion. And it's a chance to be honest, because they're anonymous. It's a chance to be honest and actually say your opinion, regardless of politics, regardless of who you know in the village. It's a really powerful tool.
In terms of districts, I think one of the most useful things I've seen is that where a district has a protocol for dealing with parish plans, where it actually says, if you do a parish plan, this is how we will handle it. And districts obviously have the processes in place, but it's sometimes very useful to spell that out to a community. If you produce a parish plan and if it's got 50% support and if it's done in this way with community involvement and it's fully inclusive, then we will do this, this and this in response to you.
We started a newsletter from the parish plan which got the word around about things that we wanted to do. There are a couple of big things in the village that it actually got people talking about. I think we started regular litter picks and things like that. It actually sort of gave, the parish plan gave a focus to the village of things that we wanted to, or that we could start, getting together. And at the end of the day, the whole steering group stuck together, and we, all very helpful, and we did end up with a decent parish plan.
We were talking about resources, and you always need money, but if you've got some enthusiasm, and that seems to be what your parish plans have have actually done, gathered together, that bit of enthusiasm. And it's just so lovely to hear about that, knowing, that we've been supporting parishes, and to actually hear how great it's been for you. It's been great. Greg, though, we're looking a bit to the future now, aren't we, and thinking about, well, what comes in the future.
Well, yes, I mean, recently, of course, we've had the concept of neighbourhood planning introduced through the Localism Act, and we need to look at how this now relates to the traditional sort of parish plan and town plan that we've been involved in before. But neighbourhood planning is very much about development, about new build, new houses, possibly about business environment, possibly about community buildings, possibly a little bit about infrastructure and roads. So it is quite restrictive, whereas the traditional sort of parish plan would cover a much wider range of activities. So although we are being offered these new instruments, these new neighbourhood